So good morning, everybody. Every once in a while, we have these daytime shows. Today is July 4th. Happy July 4th to everybody. And as I do every single July 4th, I texted my friends over in England and said, "You lost the war. Thank you very much for the holiday." And that is 100% accurate. I did that this morning on my phone. James Tonks and Johnny Hogg, thank you so much. Well, Seth, unfortunately, last night we had a little bit of confusion, and Seth is unavailable this week, so we're going to sub in my brother, Mitch Beyer. And because of that, Mitch, we're not going to do our NBA draft review because obviously Mitch did not pick those picks, and we'll do that next week with Seth. Also, we're not going to talk about the NBA because Mitch is an NHL guy, a hockey guy. It's summertime here. So we can talk a little baseball, a little NBA, and a lot of hockey because we're just going to flip the switch. Because last week was the start not only of the NBA free agency, but also the NHL free agency. And stuff changed throughout the league. We have maybe new super teams or really a return from the old super teams if you look at what the Boston Bruins did. So we're going to bring Mitch on right now. First, we're going to get Mitch Beyer. First, we're going to get the great and powerful Mitch. First, we're going to get into what he is doing for his 4th of July. First of all, is it still dark there in Phoenix, Mitch? It's 7:10 in the morning. I would think it's probably light out.
It's light out. It started getting light around like 6 o'clock, although I only woke up 11 minutes ago.
Okay, so you need to look down because we can't see you. There you go, right there. So look into the camera. Great, thank you. So anyway, all right. So good morning. Happy July 4th. What is on your plan for today, sir?
I plan to do as little as possible and enjoy every single moment of it.
Okay, so no barbecue. And
No.
And no fireworks.
I mean, I'm not doing fireworks because I like dogs. But there will be fireworks all throughout my neighborhood, I'm sure, and people are doing barbecues. But my friends are doing the parties this weekend since it's close enough. So we're all just waiting for the weekend kind of thing.
You're waiting for 110 degrees, I believe it was yesterday, to die down a little.
It was.
And
lots of pools, lots of pool parties this weekend.
Yeah. Well, this weekend. So I have been told by a friend that I am being introduced to Southern Barbecue this afternoon. Going to Fayetteville, Georgia, which is about 45 minutes south of here, and definitely a different part of Georgia that I have not spent a whole lot of time in. So when I asked him what I should bring, figuring it would be a dessert or figuring it would be food, he's like, just bring tequila and you'll be fine. So, all right, we got plenty.
You're not bringing your famous cheesecake,
dude. It's 99 degrees. I don't think. First of all, in order to bake a cheesecake, you need at least 24 hours for it to settle. And I got invited this morning, so there's no way I can make the cheesecake. I could make brownies and could make very interesting brownies, but we are foregoing that. I have plenty of liquor in my freezer. So we'll just take a bottle out of there and we'll be good to go. And and truth be told, it requires very little effort. So
remember that Southern barbecue is going to be pig, not beef.
Oh, that Southern barbecue is going to be collard greens. It's gonna be an interesting barbecue. And you're right, it's probably going to be pig on a swivel, which is okay. Look, it is a new and interesting experience of which I will report back next week as to how that works. Because you know what? As my friend that invited me said, all you got to do is bring sunscreen because you will be by far the whitest person there. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's fair. And Dimitri is ready to bring me and a couple other people to experience what he and his family do on July 4th. So I am looking forward to it. Look, these are what we call the dog days of summer, right? Between the 4th, we're starting at the 4th of July, and pretty much the second or third week in August, where and this year we have something different, right? In a couple of weeks, we got the Olympics in Paris.
And then Paris.
We have a new event that comes into our summer season, but generally after the NBA draft is over and the NHL draft is over, and after the first or second week of free agency, which we are in, both for the NHL and the NBA, both started around June 28th. The only thing that's going on is baseball and the WNBA now. But luckily for sports fans, you can tune in to the Summer Olympics this year, which start in a couple of weeks. And Seth and I will recap the NBA free agency and the NBA draft next week. But Mitch, the start of NHL free agency, I understand you're an Islander fan. We're not talking about the Islanders until the last 5 minutes. I want you to stay off the Islanders. Stay off the Islanders.
It's fine. I got this. First of all, let's just celebrate the beauty of the Utah Hockey Club. Okay. Let's just celebrate. Let's celebrate the name.
Let's start there.
The name.
So let's start there. So the Utah Hockey Club, right, which is not picking their name for another year.
Yeah, right.
If it's anything other than the Utah Yetis, I'm going to be very disappointed. I love the name. I love.
Yeah, I think it was the Yeti or the Mammoth. That was the top two contenders in the poll so far.
No, I think we have six. So they're down to six finalists. The Blizzard. Okay.
The Blizzard, yes. The Blizzard, right. I can get around the Blizzard.
I can get around the Blizzard. You know why I can get around the Blizzard? Because it's another team that doesn't end in an S. Most of these are teams so it adds to the trivia question of which major league teams don't end in S's. So you have Blizzard, the Mammoth. I don't like the Mammoth. That should be plural if it's going to be anything. It can't be the Outlaws. That should be more for a Vegas team than a Utah team to me. If most of the Utah, if you're in Utah, people do not associate Utah with Outlaws. They associate. If you want to say the Utah Mormons, I could go for it.
The Utah Mormons, that's
right. Not the Utah Outlaws. The Venom, I hate that name. That makes no sense to me. That's a Marvel comic book name. The Yeti, which I absolutely love, because that is singular and plural, is the Yeti.
Yep.
And the Utah Hockey Club or Utah HC. Okay, Utah Hockey Club and Utah HC are soccer names. They are not hockey names. So no and no. So to me, it's the Blizzard, the Mammoths, if you want to make it with an S, but it's probably not going to be there. So I would go the Blizzard or the Yeti to me.
Well, I'm just saying I applaud them not rushing into this decision. They came up with some cool colors. I really love their jerseys. They're just taking their sweet time as they can, because they're not an expansion team. They're a moved team from the Coyotes to Utah. So they didn't go through the typical expansion program like the Kraken or the Vegas Knights did. They're taking the whole team, the executives, the GMs, the coaching staff, the puck boys, and they're just moving them from Arizona to Utah. And that's that. So they have no reason to rush into anything, and they're just taking their sweet time coming up with a cool name that everybody's going to get behind.
I will tell you two things. First of all, look down into the camera when you talk. So that's number one. Number two, I hope, beyond hope, that this is not a Washington Commanders situation, because when the Washington team did this exact same thing, right? They rebranded and they were the Washington football team for 1 year. And they said, okay, we're gonna do these polls and we're gonna get to the end and we'll announce the team. And the Washington Commanders are the worst name in football. It was very underwhelming. So if they come out of this entire thing and they become the Utah HC, I will be completely everything you said is true. You are taking your time. You're doing it right. I love the colors. If they come out at the end of this entire thing and they disregard the Yeti and disregard the blizzard. And I could get behind the Mammoth. I don't like it, but I could get behind it. And they come out with the Utah HC. This is all
Right.
for naught. They lose it all. They lose all the credibility that they just garnished by taking the time, because that is an uninspiring name, uninspiring. And
Well, I think they'll come. I like their, that they seem to be on the right path, and more importantly, they've started to shed the how do I phrase this in the nicest way? The Arizona Coyotes, previously known as the Phoenix Coyotes, yes, they were crap, but more than them being crap, they had a skin of disillusionment in not just in Phoenix but in the league. You knew when you were playing the Coyotes, you had a pretty good chance that you were going to win, because either no one was going to show up at the arena, or we're playing at the smallest market in the country, or the people are good. This is where contracts go to die, kind of thing, right? And they're shedding that personality and moving into a different skin of their own in a state where you have the Utah Jazz and you have the Utah Hockey Club, and that's what you got. And if you're not into hockey and you're not into basketball, then you shouldn't be living in Utah right now, because you got the whole state behind you at this point, and they're really behind you.
So there's two things to that, and I completely agree with you. Number one is the fact that they never had ownership. Well, they did the first couple of years, but after the first couple of years where they sold to Merdango or whatever his name is, they never had ownership that was 100% on board, that didn't look at the club as an investment, but looked at it as a club, and never was able to come to terms with the state, right? Or a city, and last night, well, I'm not sure if it's finalized, but so the guy that bought the Utah Hockey Club also owns the Jazz, right? And they both play in the Delta Center. They are finalizing, if it has not been finalized, a 30-year commitment to the state of Utah and Salt Lake City to play in the Delta Center or something along those lines. And part of that commitment is a clause which the Rangers have in theirs, is that they are not allowed, to play any games outside of Utah. Any. Now, what that means is if they have a stadium series out of the Delta Center, not even out of Utah. So if they play out of the stadium, such as the Rangers playing outside of Madison Square Garden, if you notice, that was an Islander home game. That was not a Ranger home game.
Right.
When they play in Philadelphia, it's a Flyer home game. It's not a Ranger home game, because they have made a commitment to Utah for X amount of money, whatever that is, in helping out with the stadium so they can stay there in a 30-year lease. 30 years.
Well, it's the Islanders all over again,
I will be 78 years old when they can get out of that lease. I mean, it is.
Well, the kicker is that the Arizona Coyotes never owned their own stadium, and if you're an owner, if you're an NHL owner, and you have this, and you're putting $600 million, $800 million into owning a club, you want to at least have a percentage ownership rights in your stadium, and even a minority stake in the stadium. That would be fine. And the Coyotes never had that, both with what they originally came in with, and when they were playing originally. If you remember back in the day, they played where the Suns play originally. Then they moved to the west. Yeah, then they moved to the West Valley, where that never went well with the city of Glendale. And then they moved to the Mullet, the 5,500 seat Mullet Center at ASU, which I went to that game, and it was hysterically unbelievable, but it was fantastic. But it was really small. But they never owned a stake in where they played, and that's really what you want. So the big winners of the Utah Hockey Club are, besides the NHL, which managed to, one, keep a team in the Western Division and considerably fairly close to the other teams in the Western Division, which is really nice. You're going to have that natural rivalry between Vegas and Utah now, which is really going to be great for the sport. But more importantly, the citizens of Utah, we know they're rabid Jazz fans. We know they get behind their basketball team 100%. And I know that unlike Arizona fans who when the Coyotes were going downhill really couldn't get into it as much. And I was there every single year watching the Islanders. And this past year, there were more Islander fans than there were Arizona fans in the building. That's crazy. But I know that the Utah citizens are always going to be behind their team, and that's something to be said.
Believe it or not, there are only 6 or 7 teams that own their stadiums. So the Winnipeg Jets, the Edmonton Oilers, the Detroit Red Wings, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Kraken, and the Islanders are the only ones that own their stadiums, along with now. Remember, the Delta Center is not owned by the guy that owns the Jazz. It's just run by the guy that owns
it. I thought he owned it. I don't
believe he owned it. So, but you're right. The NHL does win because it was a simple solution. That's the key, right? This was not a protracted. It was protracted for 4 years, granted, with the crap that they went through. But the move was seamless. The move was 100% seamless. And now, when they do expand, and they absolutely will expand again, right? It's going to be back to Phoenix or something along those lines, or there will be somebody in Houston, right?
Houston.
There will be another team out west that will allow this rivalry to continue, along with the Kraken. Remember, now you have the Kraken, Vancouver, right? Kraken, Vancouver, Utah, and Nevada, all within and Edmonton and Alberta. And you may even move Minnesota into there, although Colorado too.
When you're talking about hockey and expansion, I know other leagues do this, but in my mind, this is how I see it. I think of your two-team symbiosis, right? Your two-team rivalry that you think of where you're going to put in expansion. So if you're going to put in expansion in Houston, you're automatically creating a rivalry with Dallas.
Yep.
If Dallas already has a rivalry like it does with Nashville, then you need to create another rivalry for Nashville to offset that natural Houston-Dallas rivalry.
So what I think, what they hope to do is, as they did in the past when they do expansion, is probably move either Nashville to the east or Columbus to the west. And if you because that is essentially a natural rivalry, right? It's only about 180 miles up and down. And Columbus doesn't have a rivalry, and they can make one in that respect, but they have to put them in the same division in order to do that. And so
rivalry does, I think a rivalry is geographic. Of course it is. You look at Calgary and Edmonton, or Vancouver and the Kraken, San Jose and Anaheim, blah, blah. You can go Islanders and Rangers, right? Of course, it's geography based, but I think there also needs to be a little bit of that spark. Like, these guys pissed me off at some past point, or the cities don't like each other, or there's a college rivalry already pre-existing. So, can you force a rivalry to happen where one doesn't exist exclusively based on geography?
Of course not.
I don't know.
Of course not. But the fact is, remember, if you play in the same division, it's more inherent that you will have those experiences, right? Or if you recall, Detroit and Colorado were a huge rivalry, but they only played each other in the finals, right? And that's how that rivalry came to be. So you have to get into. So the first step is to make it the geographic rivalry, right? And hope that plays, right? And sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't.
Right.
And that's what you have to do. And then you play them enough in that you hope that there is something more than that. You hope that by playing them continuously, that sparks something else. Because certainly, just looking at this, Columbus and Nashville are 380 miles away. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas and Nashville are 762 miles away. So that's not a geographic rivalry. That's a rivalry because they played and played and played and kicked each other's ass. That's not as much geographic as anything else. I'm not concerned. I'm more curious as to where that second team, because they're not going to expand by one. They have to expand.
They go to Quebec. They go back to Quebec.
Not going back to Quebec.
Yes, they are.
Look, Quebec would be great if you can make a Quebec team. If you put Quebec in there, right, and you have your division could very easily be Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec, Boston, Buffalo, and pick another team.
Right.
Or maybe just the 5, right? And that's your division.
Well, they were speculating the last time they did this big expansion with the Kraken.
You are never going to get a second team in Toronto.
They were going to Hamilton, right?
You are never ever going to get a second team.
Saying they were going to go to Hamilton and put it there and bridge Buffalo and Toronto in the middle, and I was like, that is a terrible. Why would you split another market? You want to expand your market, not split a pre-existing market.
Well, you'd split it because you'd have enough hockey rabid fans, and you could fill both arenas. But there's no way Toronto allows that, and there's no way Buffalo allows that.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you have right now 32 teams. So if you wanted to, even if you add 2 more, that means you have four divisions of 8 divisions of 4, and 2 divisions of 5. And if you have 2 divisions of 5, I just named you a 5-team division, which sounds amazing. Or you keep Buffalo out of that, and your division of 4 is Montreal, Ottawa, Quebec, and Boston. Although I'm not sure Boston would say yes to that because they lose rivalries in its own right.
Yeah. Well, I think this. I'm going to predict with my great and powerful Mitch face on the phone with you right now that they will expand by 2027. However, with the caveat that will be the last great expansion for a very long time.
What's a very long time? Remember
at least 10 years.
Well, the last great expansion wasn't the Kraken. The last great expansion was over 30 years ago.
I'm saying at least 10 years because of 2 things. One, every time you do these expansions with more than so if you do 2 clubs, then every team has to go through this expansion draft twice. It's twice as many players they got to protect and twice as many players they got to give up. And it's just more and more and more. And at some point, the owners of the teams have to ask the NHL, how much more do you want us to give, without you either increase the salary cap so we can go a little bit more nutso, but how much more? And more importantly, though, if you go up another 2 teams, I say this respectfully, you are running out of major cities. We are running out of major places to put hockey teams because hockey is not like football, not like basketball, certainly not like baseball. It's a smaller market overall. It's a smaller market overall, right? These are the top 4. NHL is always at the bottom of the top 4. And we know that historically it's a different fan base. So if you take out Houston and Quebec, or you put in some other, Canadian team and you put in Houston, what's left in the United States and Canada? You're not going to put a team another team in Saskatchewan. You're not going to put another team somewhere in British Columbia. Florida already has 2 teams. You have a team in Carolina already. So what I'm saying is you're running out of big market teams. You got to start looking at smaller market cities. The NHL doesn't want smaller market cities. So
here's a number for you. $62.5 million. So What does $62.5 million represent to you?
That represents uh, uh, the amount of money that Toronto has spent on trying to win a cup the last 2 years.
Okay, now what does $62.5 million represent to me is per team expansion fees per owner. So you're not going to tell the owners, hey, you're spending too much money on these expansion players when they're getting in, if you expand by 4, a rough estimate of $250 million per team if you expand by 4. If the expansion
Well, I don't think the owners are going to say it. I'm talking about more like the GMs and the coaches.
They don't care. No, that doesn't matter. GMs don't matter. It's all about the ownership. So let's look at what those teams. You said you're running out of cities. All right, let's look at 4 cities. Right, Houston is one. Right, we said Houston's a definite, without any doubt. Okay,
right. Houston's a lock.
Kansas City has a stadium, a built-in stadium called the Sprint Center. They are ready to roll. They made it for the Islanders, believe it or not. I think you froze.
The Kansas City Chiefs.
Or I froze. Okay.
I'm still here.
You're all sorts of pixelated. Okay, there you go. So Kansas City, number 2.
Right.
We could say Quebec being number 3 if you want to bring in a Canadian city. Number 4, Portland. Portland could
No.
No. You were talking about natural rivalries. Portland and Seattle are hold on. Seattle.
Yes,
Portland,
they're like 120 miles away. They're super close.
In fact, I know they're not that far. Mitch is gone again. Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon, Seattle. 174 miles away from each other.
I'm not talking about whether the cities could be rivalries. I'm saying the city of Portland, not a chance in hell, is going to get an NHL team.
Okay. There's not going to be another one. I don't believe you'll find one on the East Coast, but could you support one in New Orleans?
No.
Okay.
That's definitely no. See, that's the problem. Basketball, yes. I would sooner put an MLB team in New Orleans before I put an NHL team.
Well, but we're not talking that it's not an if or.
It's not an if or. It's a sentimentality of fanage, right?
Well, you're going back. Hold on, you're going back to Phoenix. There's no
we're
way.
not.
Yes, you are.
No, we're not. No, they're not going to go back to Phoenix until they build a stadium, and the city council of both Phoenix and Scottsdale, especially with the listen. This is what happened. All right, the guy wants to buy land on the Indian Territory near Scottsdale in a land buy deal.
Yeah,
and the state who owns the land technically. Like the last minute, the 23-hour and 59-minute mark says to them, oh, by the way, even though this land auction has been scheduled for 8 months, we now need a special events permission slip from you to show us exactly how you're going to use this land, even though we know exactly how you're going to use this land, which is their way of saying, we don't want you to buy this land. And they did it twice now. They did this last one. They were originally going to buy land up in Scottsdale, in North Scottsdale, and the city council of Scottsdale was like, no, there is no way and then the referendum in Tempe failed when the citizens of Tempe said, absolutely not. So unless they build a brand new stadium, there's no way the Coyotes are coming back.
Correct.
No way.
And I think that at some point they will build a brand new stadium without Alex Morello as part of that deal. I think he will walk. He has
walked away.
Right. So I think that this was more about him and his relationship with Phoenix than it was about Phoenix being able to support a hockey team. And I think eventually they will come back and he will not be a part of it. And I think they will get a new stadium. I do. I truly believe that.
Well, for the moment, I gotta go buy Vegas tickets if I'm going to see the Islanders next year. And I have never.
I get that. I get that. So you were asking me for places where I believe that they will come
Okay,
to
okay,
expand. And I think you're looking at, if you want four teams, and I'm not thinking that they're going four teams. I think you're looking at Arizona. You're looking at Houston. Houston is an absolute definite.
absolute definite.
Houston, Arizona, Kansas City, and then I don't know who the fourth one would be. You could definitely go up to Quebec. I don't think Quebec's going to get another team.
Right, right. And what I said, what I said originally was, once you complete the next round of expansion,
I get it.
You are then running out of big marketplaces to put a team.
Yep.
Which you are.
Yep. Agreed. And I think that's the problem with all the sports, is that you can only expand so much because. But remember, most of the money is not coming from you and me going to the games. It's from the television market. So if you could get a bigger piece of the television market, so let's say the NHL is earning $1.2 billion. I don't know what they're earning. I'm just saying, right? Because they're in 32 markets. And now they go to ESPN and say, hey, now we're in 36 markets. We're not in 32 markets. And we're in Phoenix, which is a huge market. We're in Houston, which is a huge market. We're in let's use Portland, because I'm just looking for another market. We're in 4 bigger markets now. You will have a bigger share of that pie, and the ownership won't care because the owners get $62.5 million per team. And this is 32. So I get what you're saying. I do. I think you are right. They're running out if they want to continually expand.
And the reason, I'm sorry to talk over you.
No, that's why I waited. So go ahead.
I think that you remember what I said when I was reading for the Oilers and you reading for Florida, and you're like, no Canadian team. And I said, listen, when your team drops out of the playoffs, the only thing that matters is what's best for hockey, right? Like that's the phraseology that every hockey fan that I know, at least our age, when your team drops out, it's what's best for hockey. And what's best for hockey right now, in my opinion, is to put another team in Canada. So I don't know how that happens, but that's going to be super important to the Canadian hockey market. And that's why I say Quebec, because maybe Quebec 20, 25 years ago, yeah, maybe their economy can't support an NHL team, but the economy of Canada in that general region, in the Montreal region, in the Quebec region, is very different than it was 25 years ago. I think they are still a rabid fan base. We all know that the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League is one of the premier funnels into the NHL, and they are rabid about their junior teams up there. I mean, do you remember watching? I don't remember which sportscaster it was because I don't remember names of sportscasters that well. But every single time this guy was doing an ESPN NHL game, he would talk about how this guy came from this Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and he would know like the history of the NHL player all the way back down to like Bantam in some podunk town in Canada, and he would call it out every time. And I guess what I'm saying is like that's Canadian hockey for you, right? Like they go all the way down to when this kid was 12 years old and stuff. So
Quebec City has 542,000 people that live within the city limits. Montreal has 1.8 million people. I understand that Utah has less. I am not saying that Utah is, but the market for Utah is the entire state, right? It's not necessarily just the city. And it's not broken up in the last 30 years where you become a Montreal Canadiens fan if you're in Utah. That doesn't exist. That would be the only consternation of putting something in Quebec. Not that the fan base isn't there for, quote, hockey. The fan base isn't there for an expansion hockey team because they are already fans of Ottawa. They are already fans of Montreal. They are already fans of Toronto. and whether they can become fans. And again, as I said before, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying to me, it's on the it's not on the top of their chart.
No, you raise good points, Sean. I mean, these are all speculations of
Absolutely.
future stuff. Let's talk about
Hold
for
on. Before you go anywhere, I understand what I said the last time we talked, that that I was rooting against Edmonton because and you said, well, Edmonton would be the best thing for hockey. I'm not sure it mattered who won that game 7. That was the best thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that
Having-
game 7 was phenomenal.
Having a game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals, it did not matter who won it. That was the best. If Edmonton had won, if Edmonton had won 4-1, them losing in game 7 was better than them winning 4-1.
Well, game 7 Stanley Cup Finals in Florida
Anywhere.
no, for sure anywhere, but I'm saying in Florida in June, right? In hot weather June, to prove that hockey can exist in the Southern United States was I couldn't agree more. I mean, you're right. You're 100% right. You're 100%
By the way,
right.
I absolutely hated the fact that it ended that late. I want the schedule moved up. I want it to start in early October. I want hockey over by the first week in June, not the first week in July. Because while I loved watching hockey for that entire month, when you have the Stanley Cup Finals ending on Saturday or Sunday, the draft starting on Monday,
I know.
Tuesday,
and UFA and free agency
starting 24 hours, that you could win the entire month spreading. Yeah. The NFL has learned this, right? The NFL, while they used to say we are only from September to February, right? That was what they were, right?
Right.
Not anymore. They are September to February for games. Then they have, okay, now we have the combine. The combine happens in March. Now we have the draft. The draft starts the last week in April. Oh, wait a second. We now have the schedule release. The schedule release happens in May. Oh, training camps, OTAs, those are in June. And by the way, now training camp starts in July. We just covered the entire year by having little bits each time, right? And free agency, I believe, is in May too. The NHL needs to take a page out of that because this where you go 6 months and then your biggest news cycle is when 4 days. No.
Well,
it's too much.
It is too much, but it's too much because of the potential 28 game, to the Stanley Cup. So that's the killer. No, absolutely. But I think that is the, and you could say the same thing about baseball because they play best of 7 in some of their rounds, don't they?
They do. But remember, baseball certainly does not play in the winter. Their free agency period. Their free agency period may start 15 days later, but it doesn't. Their free agency period is based on the end of the season. The NHL is starting on a certain day. You can negotiate certain days. I'm just saying start. I think they need to start it earlier so you don't get lost. The NHL free agency, the NHL draft got lost in the NBA draft and got lost in the NBA free agency. They didn't own the news cycle. Not once.
Yeah, you started in September instead of October, and then you have a little space between at the end.
Even early October. Right now they start October 10th. That's the first game for the Islanders. It's actually against Utah. The first game is against Utah. Why not start it October 1st? 2 weeks. That's all you need. 2 weeks. So that way your finals, your Stanley Cup finals, is June 15th, the latest it can be. And yeah, you're still running into the NBA playoffs. I'm not going to say you're going to lose that. But man, what a difference that would be. Anyway.
So just to move into some players, because as we all know, free agency came and
and went.
It had that bell curve where everyone jumped on it on the first and the second, and then it bottomed out, and we're only at the fourth. And I think there were some really big signings. Obviously, we don't even need to go into the Stamkos signing, which obviously is huge. But I think that the steals so far, in my humble opinion, are these. I think that the Skinner signing in Edmonton is a huge deal. I think that is a really good pickup for them. I think Jeff Skinner, signs with Edmonton.
Oh, okay.
I think that moves from Buffalo after the buyout and goes over to a cup contender. I think that's going to add a good veteran presence, and I think it's going to pick up some stuff at the end, because that's what Edmonton had a really rough start. I think it was a 2-9 start to start the season, and they didn't know where they were going at all. And they didn't, obviously they didn't back themselves into a playoff spot, but they weren't steaming into a playoff spot either. They were kind of just in it.
It caused some confusion because remember, who's the goalie for the Edmonton Oilers?
Skinner.
Right. So you just said the Skinner signing, and that's what caused me confusion because I was like, they already have their goalie. They didn't need a goalie. So we're talking about Jeff Skinner, who was bought out by Buffalo, a $9.5 million contract, which obviously sucked for Buffalo, and they buy it out 3 years into. And then, so the difference in the NHL than the NBA, you can buy it out, but you have to pay it all, or you can negotiate that buyout. In the NHL, there are certain times during the year where you can buy out an NHL contract, and depending on how old you are, you can buy it out for the team at 2/3 of the cost, and then it doubles the amount of years. So, for instance, if it's a 4-year, $20 million contract, and you have 2 years left with $5 million on each year, you would be able to buy it out at $7.5 million. $6.6 million, but you'd be taking a $1.5 million haircut on your cap for the next 4 years. So you double the amount, and that's double the amount of years and half the amount of salary. So that's how you can get under some salary caps. That's how you can get out of some contracts. And some of the buyouts that occurred this year, Jeff Skinner, we just talked about that, Jack Campbell. And the reason why Edmonton was able to sign Jeff Skinner was because they bought out Jack Campbell, which is a huge problem for them because they signed Campbell to a $5 million deal 2 years ago for 4 years, and he was in the minors last year. The NHL can get out of contracts a whole lot easier in the fact that they have this buyout period. However, it does stick on your cap for twice as long. So they may have some dead people on the cap, dead cap room. There is another way out of contracts, and that is to put them on waivers and hope that another team picks them up. Barclay Goodlow was picked up by San Jose from the Rangers. The Rangers were going to buy him out. You have to put a guy on waivers first. And give everybody else the opportunity to pick him up. And you hope that another team will pick up your mistake. And that way there is no money on the cap. So I agree with you.
Well, yeah, because they buy out he's a great example, right? The Rangers put him into waivers hoping someone will pick him up, because if we pick him up at this price, it might be a better deal than if he gets to UFA and then tries to renegotiate for a higher price. So we're locked into a guarantee at this price, which is why we pick him up.
Also
that's
a shorter period generally, because you're taking over the contract that the other team had. So the Rangers had signed Goodlow for 4 years. He's already 2 years into that contract. If he was a UFA, he may want 3 years. So you already it's a less term, and you are guaranteed those terms. Exactly what you said.
The downside is for the player, he can't double dip, because He
That's
looks
right.
at all his compatriots and like, oh, you got bought out and you're signing a deal in the same year. Your taxes are going to be, double dipping
But
at that
remember,
point.
when you're double dipping, you're still taking a 30% haircut on your salary, right? You don't get the full salary. So
Mm.
teams can say you were bought out, I'm going to pay you a third less, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
Which teams do you think? Which teams do you think made out really well, and give me two teams that you thought made out very well, and two teams that you thought kind of crapped the bed.
Well, I love how the Lightning said, Steven, Mr. Stamkos, we absolutely love you. You're our favorite player of all time. You can leave, but we're going to lock in Victor Hedman for another 4 years, and we're going to bring in Getzel, from Carolina to shore up where you left. And I think that the Lightning basically took from the right hand and gave to the left hand, and they know what they're doing, right? They're moving forward. They have a plan. I think that they have. I'll give you one good, one bad, one good, one bad. The bad. I'm gonna go with. Well, I'll give you another good one. I think that the Vegas Golden Knights, they did obviously give up Marchessault to Nashville. Obviously, that's a huge, big deal. I don't know if it's such a big deal for the core. I think he was the last great holdover from when they went to the Cup a couple of years ago. So he was the last core player. He's hugely popular in Vegas. I mean, absolutely hugely popular. But they now get Ilya Samsonov, who was once hailed, if we can remember, as the greatest goalie to ever play for the Maple Leafs, and then got traded to the Capitals and was the greatest goalie to ever play for the Capitals.
No, he played for the Capitals first.
Capitals and then Toronto. I'm sorry, but this guy was supposed to be the biggest thing since sliced bread. He's now on his third team. Just got signed for a 1 year, 1.8, and I never bought into his hype. I think he's a fun.
You just said Vegas won.
I'm saying that Vegas got a pretty good goalie in return. I just didn't buy into his hype. But I'm saying that the Golden Knights are moving forward with their plan. They're shedding their core and they're moving forward in a new direction. That you have to see that. I think when I look at things like that, I say, how are the Golden Knights going to continue at the highest level? I think they still have a good team that's going to come in. I like what the Islanders did. I am going to comment on this just for a minute. I like the Mike Riley signing. I really like the Anthony Duclair signing. You remember I called you on the phone the other day? I said, hey, Patrick Waugh was his coach in juniors. Well, now Andrew Gross did report that Anthony Duclair did get that call from Patrick Waugh saying, hey, we want you. And Anthony Duclair was like, if a coach wants me, that's the only place I'm going. Right? And he feels good.
$3.5 million to go there. I mean,
I'm saying it feels good to be wanted, he said. And I think that that's going to be good. Also, I think that the Islanders are getting the draft. When is it? Next year or the year after?
Okay.
I'm saying there's a team that's good. I think that's good to host the draft.
All right. So with regards to teams that won and lost, I disagree with your assessment of the Vegas Knights. I think they took a step back. Granted, they did get Noah Hannafin on a 5-year contract, which was great. That just happened before free agency. Teams that troubled me. The Kraken, I don't get it. I don't get what they did. I don't understand signing Chandler Stevenson to 7 years at $43 million. I don't understand how they signed Mantha.
Oh
no, here it is. Montour for 7 years at $50 million.
$50 million.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for guys that may or may not be top players. Stevenson certainly is not a top player.
Brandon Montour is not a top player. I don't care. He's a mid.
He's a top 4 defenseman. So I don't quite understand what they did there. I love what Florida did because they won a cup and then they re-signed their own guys. And you know what? They used the lack of a state income tax as a perfect positive to them because they get guys under value because $9 million in Florida is $12 million in New York. So
well, I like what the Blackhawks did by surrounding Bedard with veteran presence, right? They brought in Bertuzzi, Tara Teravainen, Pat Maroon, who is always going to be a champion on any friggin' team that guy sets foot on, and Alec Martinez and Craig Smith, who also got a 1-1. But they are taking Connor Bedard and they're saying, you are the center spoke. We're going to put all these winners or former captains or playoff contenders or anyone that's been in the cup in the last 5 years, and we're going to put them on this team and give you the skill set to go do you. And I think that the Blackhawks are making a very smart move in that way. That's a winner for me. So Brandon Montour is I'm telling you right now, like he comes off as great because sure, he's a Stanley Cup champion, right? He's coming from the Florida Panthers. But in totality, he only did 8 goals, 25 assists for 33 points in the season. That's not $50 million.
Okay, hold on. Let's give Brandon Montour his due. 2 years ago, he had 16 goals and 73 points, which as a defenseman is a huge number. So let's give him his due, okay? Yes, he's probably a top pairing defenseman. Is he probably in the middle between last year and the year before? Probably. So do you give him 7 years and $50 million? Like I said, it's a lot of money for a defenseman that you're not sure what you're getting. Okay, we got 2 more minutes until we got to go. So give me your last second soundbite here.
Jake DeBrusk goes to the Canucks. So, thank you, Jake, for landing in another place again. Hopefully you'll do well. I really enjoyed this time with my brother. I really enjoyed this time. I said I wanted to be on the show, and I'm grateful for everyone that's watching. I know Sean's been doing this show for over a decade now, right? I mean, We're talking hundreds of shows, and I know that he has a fan base out there. It would be great if his fans could, reach out and just and I don't know, say hi and have some interaction in that way. But these shows are really fun for me, and I'm grateful to be on it. Thank you.
And we thank you for joining as well, Seth. We'll welcome you back next week with some NBA. And Mitch, it's always a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for joining. Have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.